You're not audible, Prabhu. Is it just me? Yeah, can't hear you. Yeah, now try to talk.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, we can hear you.
ओम अज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमः ओम विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे। So thank you everyone for joining today's session. So without any delay, we are ready. So we have completed 8 chapters, and 9th chapter is answers by citing the Lord's mercy. Hare Krishna Sapatham, get started.
Hare Krishna. Translation. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, O king, unless one is influenced by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no meaning to the relationship of the pure soul and pure consciousness with material body. That relationship is just like a dreamer's seeing his own body working. But Maharaja Parikshit's question as to how a living entity began his material life, although he is apart from the material body and mind, is perfectly answered. The spirit soul is distinct from the material conception of life, but he is absorbed in such a material conception because of being influenced by external energy of the Lord, called Atma Maya. This has already been explained in the first canto in connection with Vyasadeva's realization of the Supreme Lord and his external energy. The external energy is controlled by the Lord, and the living entities are controlled by the external energy, by the will of the Lord. Therefore, although the living entity is purely conscious in his pure state, he is subordinate to the will of the Lord in being influenced by the external energy of the Lord. The Bhagavad Gita 15.15 also the same thing is confirmed. The Lord is present with forgetfulness are influenced by the Lord. Now the question automatically made will be why the Lord influences the living entities to such consciousness and forgetfulness. The answer is that the Lord clearly wishes that every living entity be in its pure consciousness as a part and parcel of the Lord, and thus be engaged in the loving service of the Lord as he is constitutionally made. But because the living entity is partially independent, also, he may not be willing to serve the Lord, but may try to become as independent as the Lord is. All the non-devotee living entities are desirous of becoming equally as powerful as the Lord, although they are not fit to become so. The living entities are illusioned by the will of the Lord because they wanted to become like him. He is like a person. He is like a person who thinks of becoming a king without possessing the necessary qualification. And the living entity desires to become the Lord himself. He is put in a condition of dreaming that he is a king. Therefore, first sinful will of the living entity is to become the Lord, and the consequent will of the Lord is that the living entity forget his factual life and thus dream of the land of Utopia, where he where he may become one like the Lord. The child cries to have the moon from the mother, and the mother gives the child a mirror to satisfy the crying and disturbing child with the reflection of the moon. Similarly, the crying child of the Lord is given over to the reflection, the material world, to lord it over the karmi, and to give up in frustration to become one with the Lord. Both these stages are dreaming illusions only. There is no necessity of tracing out the history of when the living entity desired this. But the fact is that as soon as he desired it, he was put under the control of Atma Maya by the Lord, by the direction of the Lord. Therefore, the living entity in his material condition is dreaming falsely that this is mine and this is I. The dream is that the conditioned soul thinks of the material body as I, or falsely thinks that he is the Lord and that everything in connection with the material body is mine. Thus, only in dream does the misconception of I and my persist life after life. This continues life after life as long as a living entity is not purely conscious of his identity as subordinate part and parcel of the Lord. In his pure consciousness, however, there is no misconceived dream. And in that pure conscious state, the living entity does not forget that he is never the Lord, but that he is eternally the servitor of the Lord in the transcendental love. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Jagannath Prabhu, text number 2, first paragraph.
Hare, Hare Krishna, translation. The illuminated living entity appears in so many forms offered by the external energy of the Lord. While enjoying the modes of material nature, the encouraged living entity misconceives thinking in terms of I and mine purport. The different forms of the living entities are different dresses offered by the illusory external energy of the Lord according to the modes of nature. The living being desires to enjoy. The external material energy is represented by three modes, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. So even in the material nature, there is a chance of an independent choice by the living entity. And according to his choice, the material energy offers the different varieties of material bodies. There are 900,000 varieties of material bodies in the water and 2 lakh vegetable bodies and 1,100,000 bones and replace 1 lakh forms of birds, 3 lakh thousand different bodies of beasts and 400,000 human forms. Altogether, there are 8 lakh 400,000 varieties of bodies in the different planets of the universe. And the living entity is traveling by so many transmigrations according to different modes of enjoying spirit within himself. Even in one particular body, the living entity changes from childhood to boyhood, from boyhood to youth, from youth to old age, and from old age to another body created by his own action. The living entity creates his own body by his personal desires, and the external energy of the Lord supplies him the exact form by which he can enjoy the desires to the fullest extent. The tiger wanted to enjoy the blood of another animal, and therefore, by the grace of the Lord, the material energy supplied him the body of the tiger with the facilities of enjoying blood from another animal. Similarly, a living entity desired to get the body of a demigod in a higher planet can also get it by the grace of the Lord. And he is intelligent enough. He can desire to get the spiritual body to enjoy company of the Lord, and he will get it. So the minute freedom of the living entity can be fully utilized, and the Lord is too kind that he will award the living entity the same type of blood he desires. The living entity desiring is like dreaming of golden mountain. A person knows what a mountain is, and he knows also what gold is. Out of his desires only, he dreams of a golden mountain, and when the dreams is over, he sees something else in the presence. He finds in his awakened state that there is neither gold nor a mountain, and that to speak of the golden mountain. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Sagar Prabhu, second paragraph. Hare Krishna, Sagar Guru. Hare Krishna, Swapna Mataji, you can read this.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. The different positions of the living entities in the material world under multifarious manifestations of bodies are due to the misconception of mind and I. The Karmi thinks of this world as mine, and the Jnani thinks I am everything. The whole material conception of politics, sociology, philanthropy, altruism, etc., conceived by the conditioned souls, is on the basis of this misconceived I and mine, which are products of the strong desire to enjoy the material life. Identification with the body and the place where the body is obtained under different conceptions of socialism, nationalism, family affection, and so on and so forth, is all due to forgetfulness of real nature of the living entity. And the whole misconception of the bewildered living entity can be removed by the association of Sukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, as all this is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam.
You can continue.
Yeah. Text 3 translation. As soon as the living entity becomes situated in his constitutional glory and begins to enjoy the transcendence beyond time and material energy, he at once gives up the two misconceptions of life, I and mind, and thus becomes fully manifested as the pure self. Shall I continue, Prabhuji?
Yes, Mother, you can.
Purport. The two misconceptions of life, namely I and mind, are verily manifested in two classes of men. In the lower caste, the conception of mind is very prominent, and in the higher caste, the misconception of I is prominent. In the animal state of life, the misconception of mind is perceivable, even in the category of cats and dogs, who fight with one another with the same misconception of mind. In the lower stage of human life, the misconception is also prominent in the shape of it is my body, it is my house, it is my family, it is my caste, it is my nation, it is my country, and so on. And in the higher state of speculative knowledge, the misconception of mind is transformed into I am, or it is all I am, etc. There are many classes of men comprehending the same misconception of I and mind in different terms. But the real significance of I can be realized only when one is situated in the consciousness of I am, the eternal servitor of the Lord. This is pure consciousness, and the whole Vedic literatures teach us this conception of Prabhuji's quote.
Hare Krishna, I'm Shivu, second. Thank you, Mother.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Abhishek,
Hare Krishna. The misconception of I am the Lord or I am the Supreme is more dangerous than the misconception of mine. Although there are sometimes directions in the Vedic literatures to think oneself one with the Lord, that does not mean that one becomes identical with the Lord in every aspect. Undoubtedly, there is oneness of the living entity with the Lord in many respects, but ultimately the living entity is subordinate to the Lord, and he is constitutionally meant for satisfying the senses of the Lord. The Lord therefore asks the conditioned souls to surrender unto him. Had the living entities not been subordinate to the supreme will, why would the living entity be asked to surrender? Had the living entity been equal in all aspects, then why was he put under the influence of Maya? We have already discussed many times that the material energy is controlled by the Lord. The Bhagavad Gita 9.10 confirms this controlling power of the Lord over the material nature. Can a living entity who claims to be as good as the Supreme Being control the material nature? The foolish I would reply that he will do so in the future. Even accepting that in the future, one will be as good as a controller of material nature as supreme being, then why is one now under the control of material nature? The Bhagavad Gita says that one can be freed from the control of the material nature by surrendering unto the Supreme Lord. But if there is no surrender, then the living entity will never be able to control the material nature. So, one must also give up the misconception of I by practicing the way of devotional service or firmly being situated in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. A poor man without any employment or occupation may undergo so many troubles in life. But if by chance the same man gets a good service under the government, he at once becomes happy. There is no profit in denying the supremacy of the Lord, who is the controller of all energies. But one should be constitutionally situated in one's own glory, namely to be situated in the pure consciousness of being the eternal servitor of the Lord. In his condition, in his conditional life, the living entity is servant of the illusory Maya, and his liberated state, he is in the pure, unqualified servant of the Lord. To become untinged by the modes of material nature is the qualification for entering into the service of the Lord. As long as one is a servant of mental concoctions, one cannot be completely free from the disease of I and mind. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Sri Ganesh Prabhu, you can read the next.
Hare Krishna. The supreme truth is uncontaminated by the illusory energy because he is the controller of that energy. The relative truths are apt to be engrossed in illusory energy. The best purpose is served, however, when one is directly facing the supreme truth as one faces the sun. The sun overhead in the sky is full of light, but when the sun is not in the visible sky, all is darkness. Similarly, when one is face to face with the Supreme Lord, he is freed from all illusions. And one who is not so is in the darkness of illusory Maya. The Bhagavad Gita confirms that Mamachayo Vyabhicharena Bhakti Yogana Sevate Sagunam Samadhyatan Brahman Viryad Kalpate. So the signs of Bhakti Yoga of worshipping the Lord, glorifying the Lord, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from the right sources, and being always in the association of pure devotees should be adopted in the earnestness. One should not be misled by the misconception of I and mine. The karmis are fond of the conception of mine. The jnanis are fond of conception of I, and both of them are unqualified to be free from the bondage of the illusory energy. Srimad Bhagavatam and primarily the Bhagavad Gita are both meant for delivering a purpose from the misconception of I and mine. And Srila Vyasadeva transcribed them from the deliverance of the fallen souls. The living entity has to be situated in the transcendental position where there is no more influence of time nor of the material energy. In conditioned life, the living entity is subjected to the influence of time in the dream of past, present, and future. The mental speculator tries to conquer the influence of the time by future speculations of becoming Vasudeva or the Supreme Lord himself by means of culturing knowledge and conquering over ego. But the process is not perfect. The perfect process is to accept Lord Vasudeva as the supreme in everything. The best perfection culturing knowledge is to surrender unto him because he is the source of everything. Only in that conception can one get rid of the misconception of I and mine. Both Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam confirm it. Srila Vyasadeva has specifically contributed to the illusioned living entity, the science of God, and the process of Bhakti Yoga in his great literature, Srimad Bhagavatam. And the conditioned soul should fully take advantage of this great science. Hare Krishna.
You're on mute, Prabhuji.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Please, Sabha, please continue.
Translation: O king, the personality of Godhead, being very much pleased with Lord Brahma because of his non-deceptive penance in Bhakti Yoga, presented his eternal and transcendental form before Brahma, and that is the objective goal for purifying the conditioned soul. Purport: Atma Tattva is the science of God, science of both God and the living entity. Both the both the Supreme Lord and the living entity are known as Atma. The Supreme Lord is called Paramatma and the living entity is called Atma, the Brahma or the Jiva. Both Paramatma and Jivatma, being transcendental to the material energy, are called Atma. So Sukadeva Goswami explains this verse with the aim of purifying the truth of both Paramatma and the Jivatma. Generally, people have many wrong conceptions about both of them. The wrong conception of the Jivatma is to identify the material body with the pure soul, and the wrong conception of Paramatma is to think him on an equal level with the living entity. But both misconceptions can be removed by one stroke of Bhakti Yoga. Just as the sunlight, both sun and the world and everything within the sunlight are properly seen. In the darkness, one cannot see the sun, nor himself, nor the world. But in the sunlight, one can see the sun, himself, and the world around him. Srila Shukadeva Goswami therefore says that for purification of both wrong conceptions, the Lord presented his eternal form before Brahmaji, being fully satisfied by Brahma's non-deceptive vow of discharging Bhakti Yoga. Even for Bhakti Yoga, any method for realization of Atma Tattva or science of Atma will prove deceptive in the long run. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Swapna Mataji, second para.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, ma'am, second para. I'm not audible.
Yes, yes. I'm just zooming it. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that only by Bhakti Yoga can one know him perfectly, and then one can enter into the science of God. Brahmaji undertook great penance in performing Bhakti Yoga, and thus he was able to see the transcendental form of the Lord. His transcendental form is 100% spiritual, and one can see him only by spiritualized vision after proper discharge of tapasya or penance. In pure Bhakti Yoga, the form of the Lord manifested before Brahma is not one of the forms with which we have experience in the material world. Brahmaji did not perform such severe type of penance just to see a form of material production. Therefore, the question by Maharaja Parikshit about the form of the Lord is answered. The form of the Lord is Sachitananda or eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. But the material form of living beings is neither eternal nor full of knowledge nor blissful. That is the distinction between the Lord, between the form of the Lord and that of the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul, however, can regain his form of eternal knowledge and bliss simply by seeing the Lord by means of Bhakti Yoga.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Sagar. Last paragraph.
The summary is that due to ignorance, the conditioned soul is encaged in the temporary varieties of material forms. But the Supreme Lord has no such temporary form like the conditioned soul. He is always possessed of an eternal form of knowledge and bliss. And that is the difference between the Lord and the living entity. One can understand this difference by process of Bhakti Yoga. Brahma was then told by the Lord the gist of Srimad Bhagavatam in 4 original verses. The Srimad Bhagavatam is not a creation of mental
Hare Krishna.
speculation. The sound of Srimad Bhagavatam is transcendental, and the resonance of Srimad Bhagavatam is as good as that of the Vedas. Thus, the topic of Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of both the Lord and the living entity. Regular reading or hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam is also performance of Bhakti Yoga. and one can attain the highest perfection simply by association of Srimad Bhagavatam. Both Sukadeva Goswami and Narad Parikshit attained perfection through the medium of Srimad Bhagavatam.
Hare
Hare
Hare Krishna, Jagannath Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Translation. Lord Brahma, the first spiritual master, supreme in the universe, could not trace out the source of his lotus seed. And while thinking of creating the material world, he could not understand the proper direction of such a creative work, nor could he find out the process for such creation purpose. This verse is the prelude for explaining the transcendental nature of the form and the abode of the Lord. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, it has already been said that the supreme absolute truth exists in his own abode without any touch of the deluding energy. Therefore, the kingdom of God is not a myth, but actually a different and transcendental sphere of planets known as the Vaikunthas. This will also be explained in this chapter. Such knowledge of the spiritual sky for above this material sky, and it is paraphernalia, can be known only by dint of devotional service or bhakti yoga. The power of creation by Lord Brahma was also achieved by bhakti yoga. Brahmaji was beloved in the matter of creation, and he could not even trace out the source of his own existence, but all the knowledge was fully achieved by him through the medium of the Bhakti Yoga. By Bhakti Yoga, one can know the Lord, and by the knowing the Lord as the Supreme, one is able to know everything else. One who knows the Supreme knows everything else. That is the version of all Vedas. Even the first spiritual master of the universe was enlightened by the grace of the Lord. So, who else can attain the perfect knowledge of everything without the mercy of the Lord? If anyone desires to seek perfect knowledge of everything, he must seek the mercy of the Lord, and there is no other means. To seek the knowledge on the strength of one personal attempt is the seed of waste of time. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Abhishek, number 6. Hare Krishna, Abhishek.
Hare Krishna. While thus engaged in thinking in the water, Brahmaji heard twice from nearby two syllables joined together. One of the syllables was taken from the 16th and the other from the 21st of the Parsha alphabets, and both joined to become the wealth of the renounced order of life. Purport. In Sanskrit, the consonant alphabets are divided into two divisions, namely the Sparsha Varnas and Talavya Varnas. From Ka to Ma, the letters are known as the Sparsha Varnas, and the 16th of the group is called Ta, whereas the 21st letter is called Pa. So, when they are joined together, the word Tapa or penance is constructed. This penance is the beauty and the wealth of Brahmanas and the renounced order of life. According to Bhagavad philosophy, every human being is meant simply for this Tapa and for no other business. Because by penance only, one can realize his self and self-realization and not sense gratification. And not sense gratification is the business of human life. This tapa or penance was begun from the very beginning of the creation, and it was first adopted by the supreme spiritual master, Lord Brahma. By tapasya, only one can get the profit of human life, and not by polished civilization of animal life. The animal does not know anything except sense gratification in the jurisdiction of eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy. But the human being is made to undergo tapasya for going back to Godhead, back home.
Please continue.
When Lord Brahma was perplexed about how to construct the material manifestations in the universe and went down within the water to find out the means and the source of his lotus seed, he heard the word tapa vibrated twice. Taking the path of tapa is the second birth of the desiring disciple. The word upashranot is very significant. It is similar to upanayana, or bringing the disciple nearer to the spiritual master for the path of tapa. So Brahmaji was thus initiated by Lord Krishna, and this fact is corroborated by Brahma himself in his book, the Brahma Samhita. The Brahma Samhita, Lord Brahma has sung in every verse, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Thus, Brahma was initiated by the Krishna mantra by Lord Krishna himself, and thus he became a Vaishnava, or a devotee of the Lord, before he was able to construct the whole huge universe. It is stated in the Brahma Samhita that the Lord Brahma was initiated into the 18-letter Krishna mantra, which is generally accepted by all the devotees of Lord Krishna. We follow the same principle because we belong to the Brahma Sampradaya, directly in the disciplic chain from Brahma to Narada, from Narada to Vyasa, from Vyasa to Madhava Muni, and from Madhava Muni to Madhavendra Puri, from Madhavendra Puri to Ishvara Puri, and from Ishvara Puri to Lord Chaitanya, and gradually to his divine grace, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, our divine master. One who is thus initiated in disciplic succession is able to achieve the same result or power of creation. Chanting of this holy name is the only shelter of the desireless pure devotee of the Lord. Simply by such tapasya or penance, the devotee of the Lord achieves all perfections like Lord Brahma.
So we'll start again. So the conclusion is we have to chant the holy names of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. We get the same results. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. So we will continue again on Thursday at the same time from the same verse. Thank you so much. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhyः vacha pattana pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Sridhar Thakur ki jai. Translated book Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam, Praveen Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam, Abhishek Prabhu, Jagannath Prabhu, Sagar Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam, Sasya Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, Swapna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam,
Dhanwad Pranam.
Tapan Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you so much. We'll meet again.